Hello everyone, my name is Daniel Palacio, and today I'm going to be reviewing Casket by Mary Enger. This book was launched on Kickstarter in February 2019 as part of the first Zine Quest event on the platform, and it was released to backers later that year. She's a comic artist in addition to the creator of this game, and she wrote and drew all the content that appears in the zine. Casket provides a occult western setting and adventure for tabletop role-playing games, to be played with a game master, called the Guide in this game, who directs the story and makes rulings, and one or more players who contribute to the story and act out their characters' actions. The rules of this game derive from the Powered by the Apocalypse engine, and those rules can be found on the website for this game, casketland.com. That's casket-land.com. I won't be going over these rules, focusing instead on just what's actually printed in this game book. I've had this game in my possession for since the Kickstarter, and although I haven't had a chance to run it myself, I have looked through the materials and given it some thought, so I'd like to share my impressions of this zine with you. Let's start with the cover. It features this evocative imagery of a graveyard with caskets standing out of the ground. It really evokes a sense of death, of danger, coming from above and from below. And you get a good sense of mystery too. I like these inverted crosses in this bell, for example. You get a similar sense from the back cover, although, like some other books, I would have liked to see continuity between the images. It could have been more interesting, but it's good. Very nice. Really kind of draws you in. The introduction gives you a good direct piece of information about the general game expectations and what the setting is like. I'm going to read just a little bit of this text. Casket is a bleak occult western role-playing game with a focus on making difficult decisions as a group. One player will bear the burden of the guide, leading the other players through the Casket Land, acting as all its denizens and monsters. The rest of the players will take on the role of a survivor, bearing the burden of the story and doing their best to keep themselves alive long enough to see its end. This page also directs you to the website I mentioned earlier, casketland.com, notice the dash, to find the rules. I have mixed feelings about this. On one hand, it would be nice to have the rules, as a reference while you're playing all together. On the other hand, it does make this book more compact, and it makes the purpose of this book very clear as well. Based on the way it's presented, I feel that this is very approachable book for new players and new game masters alike. Let's go on to the survivors. The survivor section depicts and describes the character archetypes that players can choose from. I think the pictures and the descriptions are pretty brilliant. They build up the setting, and if you read all of them, they convey a loose sense of morality for all of these survivors. And there's a big emphasis on survival. That's conveyed through these descriptions as well. Like I said, it builds up the setting. This is an Old West setting. It's kind of apocalyptic. It's nice. While I was looking at these pictures, the art in the book, which is very nice, very evocative, very stunning, very stylistic. I initially thought that these were all male characters, and yes, I guess that reveals some of my personal biases. But as I read the book and as I learned about the artist and the creator as well, I came to recognize that her kind of it's more of a gender-neutral representation that I think is very deliberate, and we'll see that with other characters that are portrayed later on. With this being an Old West setting, I had that in mind because of the way that women were treated at that time. So I think it's interesting to see how this game handles that inclusivity through how the characters are depicted. So we've got some cool options here for the players to choose from. The next section is the manifest. This section gives you the bare bones outline for the player characters, and it introduces some of the key locations and the characters. We've got a page for the characters and a page for the game master called the Guide. And it really just kind of starts to get you in the mood, sets the mood and the tone. Now we get into the character section, and I think this is one of the parts where the book really shines. This is a very welcome section for game masters. It shows you how to play as the non-playable characters, the NPCs, who are going to populate this world. And there's not a lot of them, but I think this book does a great job of giving you some background information, and it even has a small section about playing as this character. Right? I'm going to talk about these a little bit more because I just think they're so good. The first one is Loam. He's the major NPC, non-playable character in this adventure, and interestingly, he's mute. I find this to be a interesting design decision by Enger. It definitely will require a little more preparation from the guide to think about this character's physicality as they're being portrayed at the table, how they're going to communicate using gestures and symbols. I think it could probably be just as fun with a voice. In fact, the book mentions that if you want to just use your voice and speak for this character, then the players will just consider it as written down communication. But if you're the guide and you're running this game, you'll have to ask yourself, what does being mute bring to my table? When I play this game, I'll probably try to be mute as Loam. It'll be fun to see the interaction with players when I do that. And I might even think of some like pictographs or things that this character would draw, like in the sand or something like that. The other character descriptions here, all pretty helpful, pretty useful. Again, it gives you information about how to play as these characters. Just as well, when you're playing them, you'll have to decide what aspects that are portrayed bring to your table. For example, this character Enger is written with gender-neutral they pronouns. And yeah, you'll just have to, if you're running this game, you'll have to think about how that informs the way you depict the character. If you want to follow it, if you want to ignore it. You really ask, it makes me ask, what does that add to the character? There's a note at the bottom of most pages, and I wanted to bring attention to this one. I'll read it. None of the items in the equipped dwell have a price. The guide may determine all prices for all items, or what the guide constitutes as a fair trade. And I think this fair trade note really is appropriate for the setting, very suitable. The next section is on locations. These next 3 pages, they give short, evocative names and descriptions for the important locations in the game. They're great for setting the tone and the mood for the game. Each section discusses the main threats that players will encounter in each, but it's pretty bare bones as far as the descriptions go. Other books might include information about environmental threats, about encounters, scavenging items, other things that you might roll on a dice roll table. This book straight up tells you what monsters you're going to find there, or what monsters you'll find there. But still good, and it's clear and it's short too. Next section is the monsters, and similar to the characters section, I found this section to be another highlight of this book. This first character is the Sagehen. This is kind of the main bad character, the big bad of the book. And these paragraphs gives info about her motivation and her backstory, and it even evokes some possible confrontations between her and other characters, like Loam, the one I mentioned earlier. Basically, her deal is that she wants to turn people into harpies and add to her flock. I kind of wish there was a little more information about her, how she feels about her transformed followers, about the other monsters, or even these chickens in the picture. Are they transformed or something? That's just a blank left up for creative guides. We've got a page about her powers, her attacks, and we find that for the other characters as well. The next few pages are about these 3 characters. They're called the Flock, and these are, I guess, part of Sagehen's harpies. And also evocative, talks about their background a little bit, what they're able to do. There's a few references in here that bring up more questions. For example, it talks about unspeakable acts, it talks about crimes committed by this trio. And I think it would be interesting to learn more about that. Because the rest of the setting is so intriguing, these references bring up questions like that. I think it's a good thing if you're creative and you're going to fill in those blanks, but if you're a new game master, a new guide, it's a little more legwork for you. There's a lot of great detail in the art and the description of all of the characters, the monsters. I think that new game masters can run this well enough, but I think someone with a few games under their belt is going to have a good time filling in the blanks and, fleshing out some of those ambiguous bits. All in all, I'm pretty excited to run this adventure one day. The art is great, the setting and the NPCs are interesting. I recommend this book for anyone who's interested in doing this weird occult old Western fantasy setting with some apocalyptic vibes. And it's great for people who want to run a game that focuses on survival in a bleak landscape. You could call this, Poncho Punk, Doom Western, but if you're interested, you can go to Mary Enger's website for the game. It's casketland.com with a dash, right? casket-land.com. And you can find all the rules and the info there. This is Daniel Palacio, and thanks for watching.